Basically, we're facing the same kind of disastrous situation today as we were when the ALR was brought in 1973.
I think that people take a lot of pride in the farmland that we have here. I grow 9 varieties of garlic that I've been growing for 20 years, and around 2010 I started seeing advertisements for, instead of 3-acre hobby farm, we saw a 3-acre estate development potential, and I was like, what is going on here? What do you mean estate development potential? And before I knew it, it was just completely out of reach. So No.2 Road was kind of a hub for small-scale agriculture. Only just 2 short years ago, it's all changed in just 2 years. The whole street's completely changed. So this is our first mega mansion that we have here on the left. This one's actually, this one will definitely not be farmed. They used up the entire property for the house.
The whole entire property?
Yeah. This was a fairly small property. It was actually a little bit shorter than the other ones, but you could still have had a decent, garden and contributed to the ecology of the neighborhood if you didn't have all the fill and residential space that a house like this takes up. Someone will probably live in it for a year.
Yeah, so that you don't have to pay capital gains, right?
Yeah. The thing about this neighborhood is, if you look at the size of the houses across the street, all of the older houses were smaller, and they were full of trees and flowering shrubs and vegetable gardens, and the houses were all the same size as the houses across the street. This one here is, this one's 15,000, just about 16,000 square feet. And this one got in August last year, even so 4 months after they changed the rules in May, but because they had applied for it beforehand. But if the city had done the moratorium, if the councillors had voted on a moratorium on permits while they were sorting this out, knowing it was such a huge issue, but they didn't want to put a moratorium on. If they had put a moratorium on, they would have stopped this house, it would have stopped that house.
So how many bedrooms do you think this one is?
I don't know, I didn't look. But this is a realtor that owns this house.
A realtor?
Yeah. But there's lots that have gone through that are much larger than 11,000 square feet just in this last year. Many, dozens that are around 14,000. And this one was August. There's a whole bunch that were permitted in October that I called the city about, and they were all applied for before the rule changed and before the moratorium, and there was no moratorium. So
Highway.
there's a couple on Westminster Highway. There's some on they're all over the place. They're all over the place. Yeah, and a lot of them aren't being built. They, like, honestly, what you just see, and we'll see it when we walk down a bit further, is they get the mansion permit, they demolish the old house, they put a big, massive pile of preloaded fill, and then they flip the property, and they immediately list it for sale for millions of dollars more than what they paid for it, just because it's got a permit to build a mansion.
That's what
they don't have the money to build it, they just want to sell it. It's got the permit in place, so whoever has enough money to pay that and can get the mansion built will do it. So the only people that are going to buy it are people that have unlimited money.
The big problem is you can't get the farmland anymore because the huge farms, the huge mansions on the farms are basically non-farm people. And so we're seeing mansions that are 10,000 square feet. At council, they approved another 3,200 square feet, so you can have about 14,000 square foot of housing on a farm. And that pretty well takes the farm out of the reach of anybody buying a farm. And any of these young people that are learning agriculture are going to have to rent land. The problem with the land that they would rent from these farms is that one thing they do when they build a big mansion is they fill the farm field up with clay fill from Vancouver, which is very poor soil, and they plant blueberries. And that pretty well ends the farming for vegetables in the future, simply because it's such poor soil.
This is the last small-scale vegetable farm on No.2 Road that's owner-occupied. It's been the same owners since the 60s. And it's 3 1.5-acre properties farmed together as 4.5 acres. And they're very productive vegetable farmers. They've been full-time, small-scale vegetable farmers since the 60s, really ahead of their time. People in this neighborhood, people in Steveston know to come here at a certain time of year to get their pickling cukes. They come here to get their fresh cut flowers. They come here to get their honey. I get honey here year round. And her bees just free range all over this area. This is very sensitive slough habitat, right? And everything all works together. And so when you have smaller farms everywhere and they're full of flowering shrubs and everyone's growing food, then it's healthier for the bees and you've got more productivity everywhere. So I don't know what's going to happen to her bees with all these mansions. Like, it's probably changed things a lot for her. Yeah. This is the biggest one. Yeah, this one's closer to that house that we saw over on No.4 Road. This is approximately 22,000 square feet with the garage. On the BC assessment it says 19, but it's 22,000 square feet with the garage, yeah. And this got permitted last February, right when they were talking about limiting house sizes and didn't put a moratorium on. So this is 27 acres. It's actually currently for sale. You won't see it on the MLS. There's quite a few properties that they're not listing on the MLS, but they are actually for sale. And so this was just farmland. There was never a house on it. So it was quite affordable. So it was 27 acres. They purchased it for $8 million in 2016 or 2015. And then they started building the house and listed it for sale for $20 million.
$20 million.
Yeah. So they bought it for $8 million, and because they're building a mansion, it's now market value is $20 million, and it's assessed at $88,000. It was assessed at $88,000 when it was farmland, but it's not being farmed right now. But I definitely think it will be farmed, because you wouldn't want to pay taxes on such a huge mansion, on such a huge property. You're going to farm it so that you can get the tax break for sure. And ideally, they would lease it out to a bona fide farmer who maximizes the use of the farm. But this is class 1 clay soil, so this is the rarest soil in the world. So if we're respecting agriculture and respecting what this land could grow, this is ideal for vegetables, right? So if you're going to plant perennial trees on class 1 soil, it's an inappropriate use of farmland, and it's a really easy way to get farm status without actually having to do any work. So Gilbert Road is really no different than No.2 Road, except that some of the farms are bigger over there, and it's all class 1 clay soil, which is ideal for growing vegetables, for a wide variety of crops. It's the prime agricultural land. It is the best soil in the world for growing vegetables. This is your class 1 clay soil right here. This is as good as it gets. This is as good as it gets, this clay. It's so nutrient rich. It is the best soil in the world.
Including that little house, is on the market for $10 million on 10 acres, right?
Yeah, $10 million, just under $10 million for 10 acres.
Beautiful.
Yeah. This property, so this third one, they're getting older and they sold their third property here. And I think they're still farming the field in the back, or they were last year, but so they sold it last August for $3.2 million, and the new owner just held on to it for a few months, and now they're flipping it for $4.1 million. So that's $900,000 increase in 8 months. They just held it and they're just flipping it. You can just maybe kind of see how far back the new houses go. And that if each of these is at 50 meters, like that one is, then you're eating up, these are only 100 meter long, these are only 150 meter long properties, and the fill can go all the way back to 75 meters and the house at 50 meters. So it's going to take up half the farming field.
So you don't know the square footage of this house, do you?
Yeah, that one's 18,000 square feet. So this one, this is a good view of it here, because you can see how far back the house go compared to how they used to be. And then the fill goes back to 75 meters for the home plate. And so what's left of their farming field compared to what used to be done, it's literally half of the field of what it could be.
So what is that stuff at the back? Is that for a driveway, or is that brick?
It looks like building supplies. Yeah, it looks like landscaping supplies or something. I don't know. And there's nothing that the city can even do to protect the farm field. Like, even though they're saying they have a restrictive home plate, the owner can actually landscape the whole thing. They can use the whole thing for recreation. They don't have to keep it as a farming field. They can just plant whatever. They could make it into
So
a
what
playground on there. But this is the first one of the big wave of houses that started here. And this property used to be the Village Garden Pumpkin Patch. And it was a small house just like these. And it was a nice family that lived there. And they sold it, and they immediately demolished the house, and they started building this mansion. And it was the first one of the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 that we have coming now. So this is 3/4 of an acre, and it was a small house, and it was absolutely full of orchard trees. They had a huge vegetable garden in the back. And I was here on the day that they were clearing this property. I took some photos because it was so sad, because they were ripping down every single tree. There was a huge weeping willow right near the front, and they had to get rid of that too. I don't know why. And there was a heron, a great blue heron, standing in the field. And like, the animals use these fields, like it's part of the ecosystem here, right?
Yeah.
And they're clearing the whole thing to build a 10,740 square foot mansion on 3/4 of an acre. And that's what I really just don't understand. Like, how can you justify 10,740 square feet on 3/4 of an acre if the primary purpose of the lot is supposed to be agriculture? But what really amazes me is just the amount of fill, the amount of preload. If we walk to the back of the property, you can see how far the fill goes. I mean, the last house that was here, this was the driveway, and the house was on the left, and everything to the right of this driveway was farmland. Even though you might not be able to make money on 3/4 of an acre, the definition of a farmer is one who cultivates land. That's it. One who cultivates land. And then another definition says one who cultivates land either for profit or to feed his family. And so anybody who owns ALR land that's growing stuff is a farmer. So the people that lived here before were farmers. But look at this, Phil. So they say, the city boasts that they have this new restrictive home plate, and that they're going to be preserving the farmland on the smaller farms. But this is what this home plate, this is a 11,000 square foot home plate. This is the new rules.
Yeah.
And the fill is spilling down over the entire property. And this entire property had flowering shrubs and vegetables, and now there's 4 meters of fill on the farmland. And fill also contains contaminants. It comes up from the Fraser River dredging, it comes from all over the place. So the fill has contaminants, and it changes the drainage of all of the surrounding fields. So, and it's eventually just going to kind of sink in, it just kind of pushes everything out, and it alters that land forever. So it just goes to the end of that fence line, and then the next property starts, and then it's all 2-acre farms along the rest of the street. So this corner piece is just 3/4 of an acre. So it just goes over to that next house there and to the end of that fence line there. So it's the 3/4 of an acre. But it's now going to be occupied by an 11,000, the maximum allowable sized mansion, when the primary purpose of the lot is supposed to be agriculture. You know, I talk to the real farmers, and I talk about the fill, and I say, and they say, well, real farmers don't use fill. You know, you would never bring this amount of fill onto farmland.
Well,
if you built a nice small house, you could just put a little bit of fill underneath the house. You don't need to cover the entire property in fill. They weren't this high before. Like, this is a whole new level. And there's another one at the foot of Moncton that's even higher than this. The fill is higher than the rancher house next to it. It's just unbelievable to me, the amount of fill. My husband was saying, because we build, so he knows some stuff, and he said that this is just preload, and then they'll remove it to build a house. But if you look at that one on Mackenzie and Steveston Highway, they just kind of pushed it all out. So the fill ends up going all the way out to the fence line, and it eventually is going to sink into the farmland. What really scares me that we saw over on No.4 Road is it looks like they're going to be doing a very minimal amount of farming to get their tax status. So they're planting some trees, they're planting some fruit trees, persimmon trees.
I did scout out the back end of the property, and they have planted dozens of persimmon trees.